these things sparingly and as a hit. The third one is, the put down. Now, put down's been a part of jokes for years. It used to be with President Bush. They said he had a great time at Camp David, riding logs and chopping down horses. And I said it's been a core part of humour. You'll find most of the successful double acts, Morecambe Wise, Laurel and Hardy, all relied on one being put down on the other. Of course, it was the basis of racist jokes, which have now been stamped out, we're glad to say. But for years, there were Irish jokes that circulated, and it was a put down. You can focus the put down on yourself, as long as you're not the authority. As long as it doesn't dilute your authority. If you're giving a talk and you want to bring some humour in, and you're the authority, don't do a self-deprecating joke that sucks away your authority. You can use it safely for yourself. What was the one that I used? Oh, that's right, when I dropped the phone in the water bowl. I said that was my fault for trying to multitask. So you can point the humour at yourself. It's the strong stereotype, men can't multitask. So it's all right to point that humour at yourself. So that's the third one. The fourth one is silliness. Groucho Marx used to come on and said, I shot a lion last night in my pyjamas. What it was doing in my pyjamas, I'll never know. A silly proposition. The one that I read out that came from Brian McLaughlin, Why There Are No Slow Cows in Leeds, was just preposterous. It was ludicrous. It was about the council running out of money for sign, and the only signs they could buy were second-hand farmers' signs that said slow cows. And he constructed this entire story about them using slow cows signs to slow people down for roadworks. But it was really funny because it was silly. And the last one is what I call the standard one, surprise. Which is always, when we talk about the power of three in Toastmasters, the power of three works because we as humans love to put things in patterns. We always anchor things in patterns if we can, rather than remember them individually. So what we do is if we hear something, we say, oh yeah, I know where that is. If we hear a second thing, we say, oh yeah, I can see where this is going, and I reckon that's the answer. And of course, if we hear the answer, then we're very happy, and that keeps us pleased. If we hear something different from the answer we expected, I'm not quite sure why, whether it's because we're embarrassed or because there's some malfunction in our brain, but we tend to laugh. So the standard set-up joke really works. You don't have to have an exaggerated setup, but it's important this bit comes at the end. In a few minutes I'm going to talk about structures, but one of the most important structures in a humour speech is your sentence structure. And if you want to put a laugh word in, it has to come at the end. Because if you put it a couple of words in from the end, you will trample over the laughter. And that is a disaster. The audience will feel inhibited from laughing in the future if you stamp over the laughter. So, for instance, when I was talking about the autoresponder in Australian, press 1 if you speak English, press 2 if you, and the funny word is don't. It's got to be at the end. And the reason we put it at the end of the sentence is because there is a natural pause. If you're speaking normally, you'll speak, you'll pause, you'll breathe, and you'll move on. If you deliver the punch line, the punch word at the end, you pause, you breathe as normal. If they're still laughing, you wait till the laughter starts to subside, then you move on. If they don't laugh, you just breathe and pause and move on. And it looks very natural, rather than people who tell the punchline and sort of stop and wait and think, well, where's the laughter? So it drops naturally into our speaking pattern, and it delivers the laughter in the right place. So that's 5 mechanisms that we can use to craft each little bit in order to make it funny. Now we've got to hone the speech to build it. And I've just talked about sentence structure. That's one of the three structures I think we have to get right. The sentence structure has to look like that with a punch word at the end. But this is a speech. This is not just stand-up. This is not a series of gags, particularly in Toastmasters, but even if you do stand up, the audience want to be taken on a journey. So I think you should be looking for a theme, so that at the beginning they've got an idea where they're going and take them there. So you know where your audience are going to start. You've got a target up here where you want the audience to end, and what you're going to do as you hone it is build this in a structure, like that. Don't do it like that, that's not very good. So that the audience are taken on a smooth progression to where you want them to finish. And where you want them to finish is with your biggest laugh. Do not write a speech that asks the audience to do that and then laugh. That is a recipe for disaster, because the audience will not be used to laughing. They'll just be sat there. When you hit them with the big joke, they'll be thinking, should I laugh? No, is this the end? Is it the right time to laugh? What I suggest is that you look at a curve that looks something like that. And then you put your laughs in there. You can actually get a bit bigger one at the beginning. It's always good to get going. But fill the laughs up and make them almost continual. Some stand-up comics say 6 laughs a minute is what you're aiming for. I think that's a lot for a speech. That starts to sound like stand-up comedy. But you want to get these laughs in regularly. So it's about looking at each sentence and working out what's in the sentence that's going to make people laugh. Don't leave it to one big laugh at the end. By the time they do this, incidentally, if you've got 2 jokes, if you've got a best joke and a second best joke, always start with your second best joke. Never with your best joke. Because when you start, the audience don't know that's your second best joke, so they think it's good. When you finish, you want to finish with the best joke. You don't want to start here with a joke, and when you get to the end, you go, oh, that was the first bit. You've got to build it up and up. And in fact, for me, this block in here was all about Tesco's in the supermarket. That was where the biggest laughs were, so that's why I went at the end. And I'll say the bit that got the round of applause in the middle, when I shouted at the machine, that was the big laugh point in there. So build your audience up, get them used to laughing. Now we come to rehearsal. Well, firstly, when you've written these, I suggest you stop thinking about them as individual speeches, as a 7-minute speech. Start to write in blocks. And there's a reason for it. I can find the diagram. If not, it's time to reproduce a new one. This is the bit where we generated lots of material. Now we're into the honing period. Always type it. Always write it. It gives us 2 things. Firstly, it allows us to edit it. You cannot edit something that you haven't written. Even though you think you tweak it in your head, it has to be right. Then you can craft each sentence. It also gives you something else. You can use word count on Word. It will tell you how many words in your speech. You speak around 120 words a minute. So if you divide the total number of words by 120, you'll get the time of your speech in minutes. Time is everything in the humorous speech contest, particularly if you've got a real good speech. That 2009 winning speech was practiced, and I'll talk about practice in a minute, under separate heading. But it was practiced thoroughly, and it was 6 minutes plus or minus 2 seconds. I could hit it time after time after time. On the day of the contest, it came in at 7 minutes, 24 seconds. Yes. I was going as well because I could see the red light on for 24 seconds and I wondered if I'd overcooked it. And I just scraped in by the skin of my teeth. And the reason for that was the laughter. Pausing for the laughter. If you're going to write a real crack of a speech, I suggest you go for between 5.5 minutes and 6. And it may be in your club contest you finish a little early, but as long as it's over the green light, it doesn't matter. But as it builds up, I remember Aileen Bennett going to Ireland with a speech entitled, "Does this speech make my bum look fat?" And it was about men and women. So, of course, as soon as you pick a subject that the audience relates to, that everyone in the audience relates to, she had them going right from the start. She had 3 endings, a short one, a long one, and a medium one. When it got to the day, she went for the short one. The red light was still on. At one stage, she had to say, "You'll have to stop laughing because the red light's on now," because they were just laughing so much as she went through. So you've got that thing about pausing and not trampling over. You know, you don't wait for all the laughter to die down, but if the laughter goes like that after a joke, you've got to wait till it's on the way down here somewhere and then dive in with the next sentence. But that chews up time like crazy. So the timing is absolutely everything. So back here, your words divided by 120 will give you that. Then, often you find you've got too many words in there. There'll be lots of superfluous words, and comics hate superfluous words. Did you get a round of applause for that? Yeah. All right. They hate it, and one of the exercises I did on stand-up was we were given a joke on an A4 sheet of paper, which all the words were completely valid and they were descriptive and all the rest of it, and we had to pass it round, and everyone had to strike out a sentence and then read the joke, and it still had to make sense, you still had to have the joke, but it was now a sentence shorter, and we just kept passing it round and round until there was nothing left but the bare bones. And it was still as funny. And people think, oh, there's things I've got to say in that. Being brutal. We have self-indulgent bits of humours that we like. I've got them in there. There's one that I love, which is when I do the bit with the car keys, how many of us find ourselves stood in front of the house door pressing the key? Oh, just me then. I nicked that off Jim Davidson. I saw Jim Davidson on the summer season on the BBC, and he had 4 shows in a row. And I watched the first one, and he came on, and he said, "How many of us do this?" "Oh, just me then." And the whole audience laughed, almost in an admission of guilt that they all do it, but no one was going to own up. And then the next week I watched the show, he did exactly the same thing. He went on and said exactly the same, a different joke, but he said, "Oh, just me then." They all fell about. I thought, this is great, I could do that. So I write it into my speeches on a regular occurrence. And it works. But we all get little bits that we like and we're a bit fond of them and we hang on to them. Be brutal. And that's where your recorder comes in, because if you're recording your speech, you'll hear the audience response. When you go back and listen to it, if you say, "Well, that bit didn't go very well," well, it might be the first time through you say, "I'll keep that, I think that's quite good, but I'll mark it down as one that didn't go well." Next time out, if it doesn't go well, there should be warning signs. The third time, if it doesn't go well, it should be out of the script. Even if it's your favourite joke, it should be gone. So we've got to edit out these bits to get the timing. And then this bit, in here, is the bit I call the convergent bit, where I believe we should be heading for key words in our mind. I try not to remember my speeches verbatim. However, I practice them so much that it's very hard for them not to come out the same almost every time. That humorous speech I was asked to do at Watford, was that a couple of years ago when they did Watford? Someone could tell me. When they did the speech film. A couple of years ago. I hadn't touched it since 2009, so that must have been 2012, 3 years. I played it once and it was just back in my mind. And that was because of the practice. I know this will sound a bit obsessive to one or two of you, but I showed the film of the winning speech to my mastermind group who were professional speakers, and they said, how much did you practice that speech for? And I said, I wasn't sure, but in the last month there would have been 100 practices. And they said, that's a lot of practice. I said, yeah, but there was only one winner. Jerry Seinfeld, when he got his big break, he went on, I think, Ed Sullivan's show in America. He got given a 5-minute slot. He reckons he went through it 500 times. He said even on the evening of the show, he was walking around the block, going through it in his head to try and get it effective. That's one way we pick up those skills, by repeating it. The other way is if you have your recorder. When I'm happy with a speech, I record it, and then I'll put it on a CD and I drop it in my car. And it plays in the background all the time I'm driving around. And when that happens, you listen differently. You listen as an audience member and you absorb the information in a different way. It's not like learning it from text. It's not like doing mind maps or speech maps, which I also do. But it's about picking it up as an audience member and letting almost sink in by osmosis. But it's amazing how clear it becomes in your mind when you've heard it spoken back. So all this practice and all this effort, what is it for? Is it just to be good at the humorous speech contest? Well, I told you no. I said I don't aim for that. But it is good to integrate it into every speech we do. And in particular, the international speech, which we think of as motivational and inspiring and all the rest of it. I'm just going to finish with a couple of minutes, because that's all we've got, of Ed Tate's 2002 World Championship winning speech. And what I want you to listen to is the humour in this speech.
Many of us will take, next time drive a little slower. Speaking of slow, have you ever noticed how long it takes a police officer to write you a ticket? Completely eliminating all that time that you've made up. I said to myself, it's going to be one of those days. But I did the math, and there was still enough time to make my noon flight to Phoenix. All I had to do was park my car, walk through security, and be off to the gate. And as luck would have it, I found a parking spot right away. But when I got to security, there were lines for as far as my eyes could see. It was a brand new Denver International Airport, and United Airlines thought it would be a good idea to enforce the 2-bag limit. I did the math. There was no way I was going to make my flight. I said to myself, it's going to be one of those days. Now,
Right, just if you get the chance to listen to that whole thing, that humour is laced right the way through. You have 2 big laughs at the beginning to get going. And for me, that's the important thing about humour. You can put it in any speech you do and produce great results. It's Bob Richards, who was the 1979 Toastmasters Golden Gavel winner. As an Olympic athlete, said he's a motivational speaker, but he always puts his most serious points on the back of humour. Because when you make an audience laugh, they're receptive, their minds are open, they're just ready for you to drop in the big point. I think if it's good enough for him, we probably ought to try it too. Thank you very much.
Well, the only way we can follow that is with our networking methods. It's the only way to absorb it, let it sink in, and we'll come back refreshed at 9 minutes past 9. Where's your phone?